Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Now with the main headlines. Muslims in US and Germany call for global efforts to combat Islamophobia. Brazilian businesses look to expand halal food exports to Arab countries, Islamic communities. UNICEF warns of looming child nutrition crisis in Syria amid 12 years of conflict. Save the Children organization calls on Afghanistan to allow girls back to school. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear viewers. This is Yunus Dawood and you're watching Shia Waves live from Imam Hussein TV 3. The UN has declared March 15th the International Day to Combat Islamophobia with the goal of taking concrete action in the face of risking hatred, discrimination and violence against Muslims. UN General Assembly President Kabasa Qureshi also noted that Islamophobia is rooted in xenophobia, or the fear of strangers, which is reflected in discriminatory practices, travel bans, hate speech, bullying and targeting of other people, and urged countries to uphold the freedom of religion and take action against the hatred. I think each country has to pass some law making Islamophobia a crime. There should be punishment for people who attack Muslims or discredit their places of worship, said Haysam Garion, a member of the Islamic Society of Greater Houston. Munir Ibrahim, the former president of the Indian Muslim Association of Greater Houston, welcomed the UN's decision on designating an international day to combat Islamophobia. In a related context, Germany's Muslim community have called for a more determined stance against anti-Islam racism, saying Muslims continue to experience prejudice, hate, crimes and other discrimination in their daily lives. Germany also witnessed growing racism and anti-Islam hate in recent years, fueled by the propaganda of the far-right groups and parties which have exploited the refugee crisis and attempted to stoke fear of immigrants. Brazil, the world's leading exporter of halal meat and poultry, is now seeking to expand the selection of food products it could potentially export to the world's 57 Muslim majority nations, as well as other Islamic communities in other countries. Media outlets also reported that the Halal Brazil project, launched by the Arab-Brazilian Chamber of Commerce and the Brazilian Trade and Investment Promotion Agency, known as Apex Brazil, aims to investigate food and beverage companies in the country to get halal certifications and export to the Muslim world. The project will reach at least 500 small and medium-sized enterprises and inform them of the benefits of seeking a halal certification and entering a Muslim market worldwide. Nuts, dairy products and fruit are among the items that could be exported by Brazilian companies. Head of the marketing at the Arab-Brazilian Chamber of Commerce told media that Brazil's exports to Arab world has reached $17.74 billion in 2022, according to recent reports released by the Arab-Brazilian Chamber of Commerce. 12 years of conflict and the recent deadly earthquakes have left millions of children in Syria at heightened risk of malnutrition, UNICEF warned today. UNICEF Regional Director for the Middle East and North Africa, Adel Khudr, said that the children of Syria cannot wait any longer after years of conflict and catastrophic earthquakes. The futures of millions of children hang by a thread. Since the beginning of the conflict, close to 13,000 children in Syria have been killed or injured. According to the UN data, children continue to live in fear of attacks, displacement and malnutrition. Levels are always on the rise. The earthquakes destroyed families, houses and left many children afraid to return homes as aftershocks continued. Many families are now displaced and living in cramped conditions in temporary shelters and camps, according to humanitarian organizations. Prior to the earthquakes, 6.81 million children in Syria needed basic health services. Half of the primary healthcare system was not functioning, forcing many families to either delay medical care or take longer trips if they could afford it. Let us remind our respective viewers of today's headlines. Muslims in US and Germany call for global efforts to combat Islamophobia. Brazilian businesses look to expand halal food exports to other Arab countries. UNICEF warns of looming child malnutrition crisis in Syria amid 12 years of conflict. Also tonight, Climate change has devastating impact on Africa's economies and situation may worsen, the UN says. As schools across Afghanistan prepare for the new academic year next week, secondary schools aged girls must be allowed to go back to the classroom after an 18-month ban on their education. Save the Children said a failure by the Taliban to reverse this ban will drive up child marriage, exclude half of the future generations from the workplace, and entrench families further into poverty, having a profoundly damaging impact on the country's future. The Child Rights Organization said more than 3 million girls who were previously enrolled in secondary schools have been denied their right to education since the Taliban takeover. Save the Children is calling for the ban to be lifted immediately and for girls to have full access to education when schools return on March the 21st. And now we continue with some short news. The director of the Public Relations Office of Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Sadiq al-Hussein Shirazi in the holy city of Karbala, Sayyid Arif Nasrallah, has honoured the voluntary team offered services to the honourable pilgrims on the mid-Sha'ban pilgrimage, 1444 after Hijrah. Nasrallah extended his appreciation and thanks to the lower Shia servants of Ahlul Bayt alayhum salam and handed them certificates of recognition. Misbah al-Hussein Foundation for Relief and Development, affiliated to the Office of the Supreme Religious Authority, has begun preparing for its humanitarian campaign for the blessed month of Ramadan. The Karbala-based foundation is preparing food baskets to distribute them during the month of Ramadan to the needy and orphan families in the holy city of Karbala. The foundation calls on the loyal Shia followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhum salam to donate to help families in need. Floods caused by torrential rain have hit 2 Turkish provinces that were devastated by last month's earthquakes, killing at least 13 people and increasing the misery of thousands who were left homeless, officials say. Turkish media said the floods on Wednesday killed 11 people in Sanuflera, about 50 kilometers north of the Syrian border. 2 people have already died in the nearby city of Adiyaman, including a 1-year-old. The report also said that 2 people died in Adiyaman when surging water swept away a container home in the town of Tut, where a group of earthquake survivors was living. Governor Numan Hotopoglu said 4 people were reported also missing. A 22-member delegation from Myanmar arrived in Bangladesh on Wednesday to discuss a project to repatriate Rohingya Muslims. According to official sources, the delegation of immigration officials reached Cox's Bazar, a border district that hosts more than 1 million Rohingya Muslims refugees who fled the military crackdown in Myanmar in 2017. For talks with Rohingya camp residents about possible repatriation, their native Rakhine state in Myanmar since 2017, several such meetings were held between Rohingya refugees and Myanmar delegations over the impending repatriation. But move has finally slowed down as Rohingya people declined to back to Myanmar on safety grounds. In a survey recently conducted by TGM Research for 2023, about 83% of Muslims displayed their fondness in using environmentally friendly products and services. The purpose of this survey is to provide a comprehensive approach to the general feelings and behavior of Muslims during the holy month of Ramadan, based on data collected from 14 countries on 3 continents. The study highlights that Muslim consumers are increasingly aware of the environmental impact of their purchasing decisions. TGM Research is a technology-driven market research company that specializes in global online data and collection and innovates survey technology. African countries are spending between 2% and 9% of their budgets to respond to extreme weather events, according to a report released by the United Nations on Wednesday. A committee of experts shared by the findings at the annual UN Conference of African Ministers of Finance and Economic Planning in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Climate change is having a devastating impact on Africa's economies, and the situation is expected to worsen in the coming years. Antonio Pedro, the acting executive secretary of the UN Economic Commission for Africa, told the Associated Press, climate change alongside the war in Ukraine and the global economic slowdown have been identified as key factors that have led Africa's economic decline from growth of 4.6% in 2021 to just 3.6% in 2022. The UN report also said that the meeting comes as weather extremes are crippling parts of the continent, A punishing cyclone in Malawi and Mozambique has so far claimed more than 225 lives, displaced over 100,000 and destroyed infrastructure and property. In the east and the Horn of Africa, a debilitating drought has put the region on throes of famine. We have reached the end of today's Shia Waves show. Let's remind our viewers of today's headlines. Muslims in US and Germany call for global efforts to combat Islamophobia. Brazilian businesses look to expand halal food exports to Arab countries and other Islamic communities. UNICEF warns of looming child nutrition crisis in Syria amid 12 years of conflict. Save the Children organization calls on Afghanistan to allow girls back to school. Climate change has devastating impact on Africa's economies and situation may also worsen, the UN says. You can view the latest news on Shia Waves website, and you can also send news of your city or country to be published on our news agency. Contact us on the numbers at the bottom of the screen. This is the end of today's news. Thank you for watching, and we pray to Allah the Almighty to hasten the appearance of the Imam of our time. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
السلام عليك